It was met with high praise. It made adjustments to the structure of the game and actually included a good single-player campaign. But there was a catch. The end game was monetized like crazy. We hear the term pay to win quite a bit in video games now, and that's because, well, a lot of publishers try their best to squeeze money out of us, the consumers, in any way they can. And one of the biggest ways they do that is by making a system where paying gives you a distinct or indirect advantage over those who don't pony up the money. Then they try their best to be sneaky about it, but they're not always successful. And today, my friends, we are going to expose them. What is up, everybody? Chaos here. Welcome to the channel. Welcome to the video. We're going to be checking out 10 of the worst pay-to-win first-person shooters of all time. Specifically, we are going to focus in on FPS games. Let's get into it. Be sure to remember that just because a game is on this list today, that does not mean the game is bad. It means the business model was bad. In fact, that just makes things more tragic because most of the games on this list, they're actually good. They just ended up getting a lot of heat from the gaming community because of their business model at hand. Drop a like, guys. Make sure you have those notifications turned on. Ring that bell, and here we go. Let's start things off with an easy one. Infinite Warfare. It is one of the most hated first-person shooters of its time due to its setting and its business model. Now, you can argue all you want about whether or not the game was judged too harshly. The business model was not the best. A lot of people point to this game as being one that does loot boxes right, and I can agree with that to an extent. I guess it does loot boxes better than others, but it was still pretty egregious. There's hundreds of weapon variants in the game, some of which are blatantly overpowered so they can try to entice you to break out the wallet. The reason why people say Infinite Warfare's business model was good was because you could grind the game for scrap, which was currency that let you straight up buy the stuff you wanted. But the scrap earn rate was super slow, and the guns were super expensive. Many people would rather have just dropped money for supply drops and rolled the dice, and that's the problem. There were guns that were designed to be overpowered, and they were locked behind a system designed to get you to spend money to skip that grind. That, my friends, is pay to win. We're sticking with Call of Duty here at number 9, Black Ops 3, another COD game that people don't exactly look fondly upon in terms of the business model. The gameplay, fantastic. It's definitely one of the best COD games of the last decade, but the business model, well, that rubbed people the wrong way. A while after launch, Treyarch started adding new guns to the game, but the only way to get them was out of a supply drop, and your chances were estimated at, I think it was about 0.8%. Earning supply drops was also extremely slow through gameplay, so a lot of people resorted to just buying them with real money. Now, some of the supply drop weapons, they were pretty lame, like the HG40 and all the melee weapons, but then you had others that were obviously overpowered, like the NX Shadowclaw, the Marshall, and the XMC. Now, at least Infinite Warfare gave you a more direct path to grinding the stuff you wanted, but Black Ops 3, they didn't give you that path. You either got lucky with your 0.8 chances, or you were out of luck completely. Now, I loved Black Ops 3, but the business model, it's indefensible. At number 8, Far Cry New Dawn. This game was just a misstep all the way around, if you ask me. I'm all for new Far Cry games, but this isn't the way to do it. New Dawn was a standalone spin-off of Far Cry 5, which meant it had a lot of recycled content, repetitive gameplay, a lot of bugs, glitches, and microtransactions. Now, Far Cry 5, it had microtransactions too, but they were mostly harmless and unnecessary. However, the spin-off, well, lots of time savers, crafting material stuff that a lot of loot-based games have now. By coughing up real-world money, you could bypass a ton of New Dawn's progression system straight outright, which didn't exactly sit well with people who just bought an overpriced and repetitive Far Cry spin-off with recycled content. The game, it's not high on my list. At number 7, Destiny 2. Now, when Destiny 2 launched, it was met with high praise. It made adjustments to the structure of the game and actually included a good single-player campaign. But there was a catch. The end game was monetized like crazy. Now, aside from the fact that the DLC expansions were terribly overpriced at the time, there was also an issue with the Eververse store. By going to the Eververse, you could cough up some money for engrams, which had a chance of containing armor pieces for your character. Now, Activision defended this by saying the engrams also dropped through gameplay, which is true, but just because, it was still totally RNG. It was far more effective to just cough up some real-world cash and buy them in bulk. Destiny 2 now thankfully has been overhauled after Bungie split from Activision, but the beginning, it was rough. At number 6, Advanced Warfare. AW was the first Call of Duty game to have supply drops and weapon variants, and while I will admit too, it was exciting in the moment because it was fresh and new, it did not take long for things to get kind of bad. Weapon variants were abundant in this game, and like I said about Infinite Warfare, they would give various stat changes and performance boosts to certain guns, which, there were some really good ones that were blatantly overpowered so they could entice you to spend money. But whereas Infinite Warfare let you grind for those guns, Advanced Warfare was completely 100% RNG. And since there was so much stuff in the loot pool, it was super rare that you would actually get what you were looking for. There's still guns I never got to this day, I never got to experience. Advanced Warfare was a fun game. It did a lot of stuff good, but the business model, it was pretty slimy, and I think a lot of us were way too forgiving of it in the moment, including myself. Now we've reached the top 5. Fallout 76, such an interesting case study. Bethesda seemed like they had earplugs in the entire time. While things have gotten better, that's the story of the life with all these games. They launch horrible and then they get better. It's hard not to laugh at the blunders along the way with Fallout 76. After the game launched full price, completely broken and terribly shallow, Bethesda started adding in various forms of microtransactions instead of fixing those blatant issues. There were even a few cases of possible pay-to-win elements being added, but one of the most egregious was the addition of repair kits. These were items that would fix up broken or damaged items, and you could buy them with real money. Now, you could find repair kits out in the wild if you were lucky, but why would you do that when you could just go buy them in bulk and have them at your hip all the time? This game, as a whole, is a blueprint of how not to do a Fallout MMO. At number 4, Warface. Now, this game started off on the right foot, but it's had so many missteps over the years due to changes in management and publishing. Warface was released back in 2013. It's a free-to-play modern military shooter that takes a whole lot of influence from games like COD, Counter-Strike, and Battlefield. Now, at first, they were onto something, but over the years, it's gotten worse and worse with various microtransactions and obvious pay-to-win schemes where you could pay for a statistical advantage over base players. Now, I understand that free games have to make their money, I get it. But this was also around 2014 to 16 when aggressive microtransactions were heating up in the gaming industry. Warface had been up and down over the years, and it seems like it's in a pretty decent spot right now. It's got a 69% approval rating on Steam. It's not bad, but I feel like it's only a matter of time before something snaps again. This is a game with such good foundations, but such inconsistent leadership. Now we spin back around to Black Ops 4. This game had a bad reputation with the Call of Duty community, still does because of how hard it was monetized. Now, aside from all the ridiculous cosmetic items in the daily shop and the Battle Pass, Black Ops 4 also had an abundance of DLC weapons that you had to either grind for or pay for. And of course, almost all these DLC weapons were insanely powerful. But what made things even worse was a few months later. Treyarch and Activision decided to add the DLC weapons to the Blackout Battle Royale mode, but only if you own them. Meaning if you had paid for these super powerful guns, you could bring them into Battle Royale, but if you didn't own them, you were stuck with the base floor loot guns, which in many cases, they were statistically worse. It was a blatant pay-to-win scenario. And to this day, Black Ops 4 is not exactly fondly looked upon because of that. The gameplay was solid, and it got better over time, but the business model, it was terrible. And in my opinion, it's hands down the greediest Call of Duty game to date. At number 2, Battlefield Play for Free. Do you guys remember this gem at all? Do you? Battlefield Play for Free was a PC exclusive Battlefield game developed by DICE and published by EA in early 2011. It played like a cool greatest hits Battlefield game, and for a while, people were digging it. EA really had something going here, but then they had to snap out of reality and become EA again. Around December of that year, the weapon system was overhauled. They nerfed all the base weapons and cranked up the power and the price of others. People who had already paid for certain guns were furious that their gear was now pretty much unviable, and they would have to start paying up to stay in competitive stances. And the community was pissed. Battlefield Play for Free ended up losing much of its player base after this, and the servers were shut down a few years later. If this game had if it had been managed fairly, there's no doubt in my mind, it would still be going today. And at number 1 today, there's no shocker here. Star Wars Battlefront 2 2017 pre-overhaul. I'm sure you guys knew it was coming. It launched in the worst state ever, and to this day, it's one of the worst examples of a pay-to-win game, all made worse by the fact that it was $60 on launch day. Battlefront 2 used a system called star cards, which would increase certain stats when you equipped them, like increased health, increased damage, so on and so forth. Things that gave you straight up statistical advantages over other players in game. But how did you earn these star cards? Well, you either grinded for dozens and dozens of hours to get a couple that you wanted, or you just bought them in bulk with real money. It was a terrible system. Somebody could literally have a huge advantage over somebody else just because they opened their wallet, and that was unacceptable. And there was other stuff too when it came to unlocking like Vader and all that stuff. EA was raked over the coals for this when they eventually overhauled the game. Battlefront 2 is actually in a good spot now, and it has a loyal following, which is kind of impressive considering where it came from. Now hopefully EA took this to heart and doesn't try to pull it again in a few years when we get another one, which we probably will. And there you have it, my friends. Those are 10 of the worst pay-to-win FPS games of all time. Some of them are in better spots now. Some of them, they didn't make it. If you guys enjoyed the video, drop a like, and I'll see you soon.